Hello, this is James Helm of Helm Enterprises Forging Division, standing between the Disposa Hammer and Gunhilda in my world headquarters just south of San Antonio, Texas. And I am now a Forged and Fire champion. If you haven't seen it yet, it is Season 4, Episode 3, The Katzbatger. I'm being filmed by another Forged and Fire champion, Tobin Nieto, Season 2, Episode 8, The Pirate Cutlass. Okay.
That guy. Yeah, this guy. Season 2, Episode 8, Stonehaven Knifeworks. We made a Cutlass. That was a scary pirate. Go.
So, I can't say a whole lot about the show. We have non-disclosure agreements that we signed, but I just wanted to say a little bit about it. We made a pair of push knives to begin with, and then we made a katzbatger. Will you stop shifting back and forth?
No, I'm sorry, I can't.
Well, then sit down. Bring the chair over. Bring the stool.
I'm sitting. I'm gonna ride your anvil like a wild pony.
Stop it.
Okay, hold on. Keep talking. I'm filming.
No, stop filming.
Okay.
So I can't say too much about it because we signed non-disclosure agreements, but I just wanted to give my take on it a little bit and answer a few comments that I've seen online. So we started out for the first challenge making a pair of push knives out of some 1-inch square W1 bar, and then we made katzbatgers for the main challenge. There was no aspect of it that was easy. It was doable, but it wasn't easy. I'm glad we had the challenges we had. They were challenges, but it took pretty much everything that I could do to turn in something usable at the end. Nobody walks out of that competition saying, "Man, that was the best knife I ever made." You have sufficient time, you don't have extra time. You have sufficient time to deal with problems, but you have to resolve them as quickly as you can because that clock doesn't stop. So I've seen people commenting about how they think that the show is fake and choreographed. It's not. I mean, there's plenty of drama that goes on when you put 4 wild personalities into the mix like that. All knife makers are weird, all blacksmiths are weird. Some of us are weirder than others. Some of us have 0 social skills. Some know that we're weird, and some, I think, don't realize how odd they are. Tobin knows he's weird. I know him. But, you put 4 people like that into a competition, and you're automatically going to get some interesting things going on.
You're gonna get comedy gold.
Comedy gold sometimes. But we are not asked to do or say anything. If you see somebody acting crazy on film, that's just them. They might be handing it up for the camera. I didn't. I just come that way. I
can attest to that.
Yes. Much to my wife's embarrassment. Hi, Allie. But they didn't ask us to do anything. They gave us the challenge, they gave us the time, they turned us loose, and we did our thing. There was a lot that did not make it into the final show simply because you have probably hundreds of hours of footage that are filmed for every episode, and
for each individual smith.
Huh?
For each individual smith, there's hundreds of them.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Dang it.
A lot of time.
Dang it.
There's a lot of time.
Gotta start over.
You ain't gotta start over.
I gotta start over.
This is real, man.
Stop it.
Okay. There we go.
I don't remember. I was gonna say 7-hour documentary on what?
I saw a 7-hour documentary on Friday the 13th.
Wow.
It took me 4 days. We're filming.
That's funny because the Jehovah's Witness just left me a watchtower with an article about the evils of scary movies.
Scary movie the series or just scary movies in general? Ooh, I'd like to read that.
You may have it.
From the Watchtower Society in Brooklyn, New York.
Stop it. Oh. There's a lot that happened that you do not see on the final television show simply because they film, I'm sure, hundreds of hours for every episode. It has to all be cut down to 43 minutes of runtime. So, especially like the 5 days in the shop, there's all kinds of things that happen that you don't get to see as the public simply because there's not time for it. You have to have time for the first challenge. You have to have time to do the second challenge at the end. I mean, there's a limited amount of time. So for both Paul and I know we had our katzbatgers fight us every step of the way. I mean, what you saw in the show was actually not even the worst of the things that went wrong with my katzbatger. I had a massive warp like I've never seen. It would have been great if the blade was a bow for shooting arrows, but not so great if you want to have a double-edged katzbatger sword at the end. So, I mean, I had named it Der Doppelschwert because I had to do everything twice. You know, the double sword. So, it was a struggle. I'd like to address some of the complaints that I've seen online about the show. The show is not perfect. It can't be. If you made it where it appealed to knife makers, it would be pretty slow. You'd see technique a lot, but it wouldn't make it for the general public. So it's not going to be a perfect show. I hate reality TV in general. Quit filming my cat licking her butt.
Hey, kitty, kitty.
There was a hot rod show that came on that I was excited to see when it heard it was going to be airing. When I watched it, I was horrified. It was people screaming at each other with hot rods in the background. I don't like that. I want to see how things are done. So when I was contacted with a mass email back in season 1, I didn't respond because I didn't want to be part of a reality TV show. So it wasn't until my friend Tobin went on and I actually saw some of the show. It's like, oh, this isn't screaming with knives in the background. This is actually pretty good. So it's not a perfect show. I have issues with some things. I understand some people's concerns with it, but don't necessarily agree with those concerns. And then they have some concerns that I pretty much reject. But I feel like overall they do a good job of presenting the craft. It's overall a boon to our craft, and I felt like I would have no trouble participating in the show, and so I went, and I ended up winning.
At the end of the day, that's all that matters.
The fact that I got $10,000.
I won! I'm a winner! America! Sorry, okay.
Damn it. So I've seen some pretty wild rumors on discussion forums and Facebook and so forth about the show. One of them was that somebody thought that they put a flammable liquid on the floor and then choreographed with the smiths so that when you drop the steel accidentally, it catches the floor on fire. No, nothing is choreographed. The floor has an epoxy shop coating on it, which is not necessarily the best for a blacksmith shop, but it's pretty standard practice for shop floors. And when you drop something hot on it, it catches fire. I have some rubber anti-fatigue mats on the floor here around my power hammer. If I drop steel on it, it catches fire. And if you haven't worked hot steel before, you don't realize you always end up dropping it at some point. You're not supposed to, but hey, it happens. Another guy was talking about how he thought there was an accelerant in the quench oil to make it flare up really big. Well, as far as I know, they don't add any accelerant to the quench oil. It's a fast commercial quench oil. They told us the specific brand and type it was. I don't know that I can tell y'all, but they told us exactly what it was. And I have used the fast commercial quench oil before, and it has a low flash point, and if you're quenching too hot or you have quenched several times and the oil is up to temperature, it will flash very easily and you'll get a big fireball. You don't necessarily realize how big it is because you don't have slow motion cameras capturing the event while you're sitting there quenching your blade. So it looks very big. The forges that they're using are 3-burner gas forges that are running wide open. They're very hot. It makes it great for forge welding, but it makes it difficult not to overheat when you are doing the hardening. So if you pay attention to the show, you'll see a lot of smiths are quenching with their blades too hot, and a lot of them are not leaving their blades in the oil long enough so that when they come out, it will flash the vapors coming off the quench oil. So it's not something that's engineered, that's quench oil.
It's the nature of the quench.
That's the nature of the quench. So a little bit extra about the quench oil. I had terrible problems with the second push knife warping over and over again. So I quenched 4 or 5 times in total in the oil. The only time it flared up was in the final quench. So that's when the oil had gotten up to temperature enough that it hit the flash point when I quenched. That, of course, is the footage that they showed, because it's more interesting when you have a fireball than when you don't. But all the rest of the time that I quenched, the previous 3 or 4 times, there were no big giant fireballs.
Oh, I would like to say something really quick.
Okay, well, here.
Okay, hold on.
Really quick, I do want to say one thing and about being on the show, because I was on season 2, and I guess I can talk about this really quick. In the order of filming, we were actually my episode may have been the 8th one to air, but we were the first one to film for season 2. So we were fresh off that first season, and it became kind of a bigger, I guess, it became popular a lot faster than people expected, and just by word of mouth. And James was the one who sent me the information. I sent them all my info. I will say this about when you're actually on the floor forging. Everybody that is there working on the floor, from your producers, and especially the camera operators that are there, are very professional. They stay out of your way. So when you see every smith running around forging, just remember that when the camera's on them, there's somebody there just following the action, but staying out of their way. So nothing is choreographed. I mean, there's nothing really. I will say this, because I can attest to this. The only part that I did choreograph with the camera operator, just letting him know when I dropped my blade and it hit the floor, I said, I'm going to drop my blade, and if it's going to break, you're going to have something good here. But I told him that it wasn't anything coming from the producers or anybody else. So when I dropped it, I told him it happened, And that's one of the things. They give the smiths on the show a lot of leeway to say, okay, I'm going to be doing this. I'm going over here. I'm doing that. And that way, they know where you're going, so they can follow you, but they stay out of your way. And so that's very professional of all of them. Everybody that, when I was on there for season 2, from the sound guys to the camera operators to the director on set, and even some of the producers that are listening in the booth and all that, all very professional. Makeup as well. And that's a great thing. So, and they were very tolerant of understanding all of these, like James addressed before,
weirdos.
All the different personalities of knife makers.
Weirdos.
Yeah, some are weird, some are more weird than others, and some are just kind of, but for the most part, everyone is there is professional. And and everyone, I think if you talk to any person that's been on the on Forge and Fire, everyone that's there in the background has been on some show or is assisted in another production of some kind. So they're all experienced. So that's all I can say about it. They're consummate professionals. And that's the major thing, huh?
And another stupid thing that I've seen people comment on various internet sources is that they feel like the show encourages unsafe practices for extra drama. No, they're very safety conscious. They've got medics on set. They want to make sure that you have your personal protective equipment on. When you're cutting on the bandsaw, they want you using a push stick instead of just your bare hands. They've changed how they allow you to grind on the grinder. You can't grind on top anymore because they had someone that was grinding on top of the slack belt and doing so in an unsafe manner.
Andy Holmes.
You aren't supposed to do that.
Yeah, don't do that, Andy.
So they've changed their practice based on what previous smiths have done that were unsafe. They don't want you getting injured. They don't want you getting hurt. Jesse didn't just have heat exhaustion. There was an underlying medical condition he didn't know about until the show. He's okay now. It's just something he has to watch out for. But they're not deliberately setting you up to have an emergency. They try to keep that from happening. I've seen people complain about how the forges are turned because they're all pointing sideways. Well, where you're working at the anvil and at the tools is not in line with the forges. You don't have to sit there next to the forge and look in the whole time catching the dragon's breath. When you're over at the anvil, you're plenty far away enough from the forge. When you're working at the press, you're plenty far enough away. Same thing with the bower hammer. So yeah, it gets hot around the forges. You don't have to hang around the forge. Just, don't let it sit there and overheat too much. Check on it, but then walk away from the forge. So if you turned it sideways, then the forges are going to be throwing their dragon's breath towards where you're working. I mean, yeah, it's not an ideal situation, but it's not that bad. It is plenty hot. They have people there who continuously refill your water container, those little stainless steel flasks with fresh cold water. They try to take care of the contestants. Things happen. Working in a shop is dangerous, just regardless of whatever. But personally, it was actually easier for me to work in the shop, in their studio, than it was here, because it was more spacious. Everything was in its place. In my shop, it's like an obstacle course sometimes. And there's a place for everything, but there's also 5 alternative locations that it probably might be in. So if I needed to find something, I could holler out, hey, where's the so-and-so? And they'd point for me, and I could go find it quickly. But the working conditions there were not a problem. It was a little hot, but I'm in freaking San Antonio, Texas. I've forged hammerheads in June when it was 110 degrees. You have to learn how to manage your body temperature. So that's just how it is. Some of the other complaints I've seen are things that I can understand, like smiths want to see more time given to the competitors so that they can turn in better work. Well, frankly, it's physically demanding to work without break as long as they give you. I mean, it took all I could do to make it through the 4 hours. I was very careful about monitoring my body heat, what my hydration level was, how hungry I was. That's why I took the trail mix, #snack break. It worked well because I needed physically recharged. I was multitasking. I was letting my steel cool down so that I could grind on it without cooling it down in the water too fast and cracking it. So while that was cooling off, I was recharging my body. But it's physically demanding. Yes, kitty cat.
Kitty cat agrees.
And any competition is going to have a time factor to it. I mean, cutting competitions, tractor pulls, whatever. You have people that are watching it. They don't want to sit there for 4 hours watching you hand sand down to 1500 grit on your blade. Nobody walks out of there saying, that's the best knife I made. You're making something that'll work in the performance, and beyond that, you try not to worry about it too much. Those were some ugly, ugly push knives that I did, and that was an ugly katzbatger I did. But they performed. I could have had a better performing cutting edge on that bottom push knife, but that's how things go. So I understand the complaint about the time, because meticulous craftsmanship takes time, but it does not it's not conducive to a competition setting. Another complaint, which I don't agree with, is you have smiths that say they don't like seeing them use salvage materials for the competition. And I understand why they say that, because you get a lot of beginners coming in on knife making forums that they don't have background information. They want to learn how to make knives, but they haven't read the 50 stickies at the top of the page that address every question that they're asking. And they try to use inappropriate materials to make their knives, and they're making something that isn't going to work well or has a good chance of failing on them.
Railroad spikes don't make good knives.
Railroad spikes, lawnmower blades are very much a crapshoot, you know, but they don't have the background information to know that. So it has become common for more experienced knife makers and smiths to tell beginners, don't worry with scrap metal. Go ahead and spend the money. It's not a lot. You'll pay more for shipping than you will for the steel. Spend the money, get good steel so you know what it is, so you can work with a known factor and you can end up with a good product. So I understand that. I just don't necessarily agree with it. Because if you know a general idea of what alloys tend to be used to make certain things, then you can work with a wider range of stuff and you can build good tools from free material. But you have to have a knowledge base. You need to know if it is this, then it's probably this alloy. This is how I need to heat treat it. This is how I need to test it beforehand before I put a lot of work into it to make sure that it is going to act a certain way and I'm not wasting my time. Like lawnmower blades are particularly bad. They used to be pretty reliably good steel, and now they've gotten to where a lot of them won't harden. And I have personally witnessed this. Blacksmith friend of mine wanted to make a knife, and so they brought in some lawnmower blades. Well, we tested it first with an oil quench to see if it would skate a file. No, it would not. With a water quench, it sort of skated a file. The file was still biting in. So it's very low carbon. You would not end up with a good knife. But if you just assumed, hey, this is a lawnmower blade, it must be good steel, then went and made a knife and didn't test the material beforehand, then you're going to end up with something that you've wasted a lot of time on and doesn't work well. So I understand the argument, I just don't agree with it. You need to test your material, you need to know what it probably is. When I was teaching knife making classes, my rule of thumb was if it's something that flexed, cut, or resisted impact in its previous life, it was probably good material to use, but you need to test it. And the challenges that they have on the show with the salvage materials, I think, do a good job of that. Mm-hmm. Does the bladesmith have a good general background knowledge of what kind of steel gets used for different types of tools? And what they use on the show, somebody has already tried out and made sure that yes, it will work for the challenge we're doing. Mm-hmm. So it's up to the smith to have that background knowledge that if it's this, then I can make this. You know, I should choose, you know, a torsion bar out of a vehicle versus chain link fence. You know, very obvious. And for the vast majority of mankind's history, back in time, all around the world currently, most smiths making blades have not been using a known alloy. They've either been smelting it out of the dirt, so you have, you know, blooms with high carbon parts and low carbon parts and cast iron and wrought iron, everything in between all along the spectrum, and they have to learn how to figure out which part of this does what. So they aren't working with a known alloy. Around the world these days, most third world smiths are not working with a known alloy. They're using salvage materials. So it's very easy for an American 21st century knife maker to say, oh, I'll just order up some steel from New Jersey and have it shipped out here to Texas and wait a week and I'll be good to go. But that's a very narrow slice of what is the human experience in making blades.
Hashtag New Jersey Steelbaron.
That's where I get mine. Another thing that I've seen people complain about online with the show is that they don't like the weapon aspect of the knives and swords that are made. I don't get that at all. To me, defense is as important a need as food and shelter water. Food, shelter, water, and the ability to kill something if you need to. So, I make tools, but I also make tools that can function well as weapons. And I have zero problem with that. I've seen people say, well, we're going to make the general public more scared of what we make. It's like, if they're going to be scared of weapons, they're going to be scared of it regardless of what this show depicts. I mean, that's just stupidity on their part. That has no reflection on the real world. A lot of my customers are current and former military. I have absolutely no problem making a weapon for someone that's going to be carrying it on their gear while kicking indoors in some unpleasant part of the world. You know, it's not the fact that it's a weapon that I would be concerned about. You know, somebody that's talking crazy and acting like they're going to misuse the weapon, then I would have a problem with them having one. But it's not about the weapon, it's about the person. Weapons themselves, got no issue. So that is something that I see commented on a lot that just, to me, does not hold water. So two things that I see a lot on forums is the question, do you get to keep your whatever you make? No. Nope. Everything that every smith makes for the show belongs to the show. And frankly, I don't think I would want mine. They were pretty ugly. I didn't put my touch mark on them. You know, they are the shows. And I'm fine with that. I knew that going in. The other thing is, I've seen literally people say on forums, well, I know for a fact that they don't temper on that show. And my response is, then you don't know much about knife making, because a fully hardened, untempered blade would not withstand the kinds of tests that they do to them. They would shatter. So obviously they have to be tempering. You know, even if I hadn't been on the show and competed and saw what they did, I would be able to figure out, yes, they did temper, because otherwise you'd snap off the blade the first time you went to chop in a piece of hardwood.
Yeah.
So, yes, they actually mention this every episode, but like I said, they've got hundreds of hours of footage to chop down to 43 minutes. So it has usually been cut out in the editing process. Every once in a while you'll see a show where they mention it, but most of the time it gets cut simply because of time restrictions. Yes, whoever is the master smith judge for that particular episode, either Jay Nielsen or Jason Knight, does the tempering for you. You're in charge of quenching it, making it hard. He's in charge of pulling the temper back to where it should be for the alloy you're working for. And they do a good job with it.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to worry about the tempering. They do it right. You have to worry about you hardening it correctly. So, yes, they do temper.
Oh, and David Baker on a live stream even showed the little back room where they keep the ovens. So, yes, it's been verified many times that they temper.
Yes, their tempering ovens are in a little corridor right next to the corridor of shame. One complaint that I've seen is that knife makers would like to see, you know, samples of the contestants' previous work, so you can kind of judge, is this somebody that's at the top of the craft, which they have been a number of extremely talented, even master smiths that have been on the program, or are you somebody that's kind of a dabbler? I understand that, but once again, you have 43 minutes for the entire show. So you don't really have time to. What I would like to see on the show that they're not doing is when they have the contestants introduced and they give the name and they have the caption with the name down in the corner, all they have is the first name. It would be nice if they had the first name and the surname, especially because some of us have oddly spelled names and it goes, you know, that quick on the show. So it would make it a lot easier to see who did I just watch if they had both names on the screen instead of just the first name. I've actually had people that were on there that I've seen their work online and I didn't realize it was them because, you know, it's just another Dave. Instead of, oh, that's Dave so-and-so. Oh, I know him. I've seen his work. Okay, that's who I'm watching. So that would be nice. Specific to my own episode, I know I saw people comment that they didn't think I ground at all on the blade in the first round. Well, I did. They didn't show me on the grinder I did most of my shaping by forging, but it was not all hand forging. I made extensive use, especially of the fuller dies on the forging press. I did use the Big Blue also some, but I made extensive use of the machinery there. With the time frame, you kind of have to. I make use of machinery normally anyway. You know, there's a lot of hand forging that goes on even after you're through with the machine forging. The machine forging speeds it up. So yes, I did use the machines, and yes, I did grind in the first round, but I wasn't doing everything by hand. A little bit about the experience of being on the show. You know, personally, there's a whole lot of sitting around waiting, and then when the clock starts, it is just frantic energy. Some people are bothered by being on camera. I guess I got enough experience doing these little YouTube videos that the cameras didn't bother me. I was never unaware that they were there. I always knew I was sitting there being filmed, but they just didn't bug me. And I tried to work with the cameraman. If I was going to be moving to a new machine, I would point, hey, I'm heading over there, so that they could safely track me. I was able to convert all the stress of being on the show and filmed and competing into efficiency. So I may look like I'm nonchalant while I'm forging, but the entire time my mind is problem solving. It's like, what is going on with the steel? What's a possible thing that can go wrong? How would I fix it if it does? How am I going to attach the handles? You know, how's my body feeling? Do I have time to step away from the forge and cool down while I'm waiting for the steel to heat up? Or is it too thin? You know, it is constant problem solving. And
time management.
Time management is part of that problem solving. And that's something that a lot of knife makers are critical about the show, that it doesn't let you do your best work, but it is problem solving. You will have problems come up during your episode. How do you deal with them? Do you panic? Do you calmly fix it? Do you have several different possible solutions? Does it just make you shut down? Does it make you want to stop and cry? You know, it's a good competition. No, you don't end up with something that you're necessarily going to want to sell to somebody. But it tests your ingenuity. It tests your ability to deal with stressful situations and come out with something that'll work. So it was an enjoyable process. It was not easy. There was no part of it that was easy, but it was enjoyable. It's a lot more enjoyable now that it's over and I can watch it on TV and I can laugh at myself being silly, waving my sword around, and it says in the captioning, screams. That's hilarious to me. You know, as you're working, you can kind of hear some of what the judges are saying at the table. So as I'm sitting there letting my steel cool down, I'm recharging with water and trail mix, hashtag snack break. You know, I hear Will say, I don't think we've ever seen anyone take a snack break in the middle of a forging session before. That's hilarious. You know, I heard Jason Mike say, I've seen James's work before, and then I couldn't catch the last half of the sentence. I have no idea what he said about my work. So I'm kind of curious if I can, next time I talk with him, if I can find out if he remembers what he said about my work. Because I was hoping that would make it into the final cut. You know, it was a good experience. Basically, with what I won, you know, I'm setting aside for taxes, I'm catching up with bills that I'm behind on, and I'm investing the rest of it into my shop so I can make more knives. And I'll talk about those things in another video. But the prize money is going towards business expansion, you know. There's a lot of people wanting blades from me, for which I am very grateful. Thank y'all. I like happy customers. And at this point, I just need to make more knives. So hopefully, with the upgrades that I'm being able to do because of winning the show, I will be able to get more of my blades out there for y'all to make use of.
I spent all my money on hookers and blow.
I'm editing that out. One of the side effects of the show is that you're generating a lot of interest from the general public in your craft. And you have a lot of people that are wanting to at least learn some of the basics of how it's done. They're not necessarily going to go on to become the next mastersmith, but they might. And so a lot of people are wanting to get started in knife making. And the background that I have, you know, I have power hammers, I've got digital electric furnaces for heat treating, I have a lot of machinery, but the background that I come from in knife making is a minimalist background. And it can be done literally for no money, depending on what you want to make and how much ingenuity you have. Because at its most basic level, blacksmithing is literally one step above Stone Age technology. So I'm going to do another video at some point here soon, hopefully, where I will give some resources. If you want to find out how to do it, that information is available. A lot of it is free, the rest of it is cheap. So don't try to reinvent the wheel. It is more important that you have background information and knowledge of how to do things, what's involved, than it is that you have a freaking power hammer or, you know, big belt grinder, whatever. Knowledge is more important than to it. So I will be shooting a video here before too long. If you're interested in getting started, this is an inexpensive way to get started. Here's the information resources to use.
Or find teachers in your area.
There are teachers around. One of the things that we would hear when Tobin and I had tables at gun shows, you hear the same stupid comments over and over again. And one of them was, well, blacksmithing, that's a dying art. It's like, no, it's not. It is growing at a faster rate than it ever has before in the history of mankind because of the internet.
Yeah.
So if you want to do this, the information is out there. Just get ready to read, because you can learn every day in this craft until you're dead, and there will still be more to learn. Yeah. But you can work and do a lot with a basic foundation of knowledge. So, anyway, it was worth doing the show. I'm glad I did it. I wouldn't mind going back on. I don't want to do a show where they're filming you every day, but going on and competing for one round, I'm down for that. So, appreciate it, and catch me in the reruns. Catch you later. Something that I commented on that got cut out during the editing process was that with the katzbatger, I did not do anything different to it than I do with any of my blades. It was bigger, it's got a little bit different kind of handle construction since it has the S-guard and the pommel, but I used 80 CRV2 steel, which is what I use on all my blades except my tomahawks these days. I used TerraTough for the handles. I didn't make it extra robustly thick. I didn't give it an extra robust edge. It was shaving hair off my arm before I did the fruit cut tests. I built it as if I had some soldier come to me and say, hey, I'm going to carry a katzbatger on my molly gear. You know, of course, I try to convince them not to carry a katzbatger, carry something a little more practical to the modern battlefield. But you know, if I was building a katzbatger for a modern soldier, that would have been the approach that I would take. Take a little more time, be a little more careful with it, but everything else, it was built as I would build a modern katzbatger. And nothing about it was significantly different from how I do all of my blades. It was the same heat treatment, it was the same alloy, it was the same kind of edge, same kind of cross section, everything. So when they tested that sword, they tested all of my work at the same time. And two of the tests, particularly the bullet split and the pig carcass cut, were tests that I've been curious about but never had an opportunity to do to my blades before. You know, the bullet split, put stress on a very small area of the blade, and it held up well to that. And I do a lot of wood cutting with my blades, but I don't get to cut a lot of meat with them, especially through bone. So the fact that it cut through the spine and some of the ribs and almost cut through the carcass as a one-handed sword that's fairly lightweight. It was under 2 pounds 11 ounces. It was a little under that. The fact that it was able to cut most of the way through the carcass like that without chipping out on the bone, all it did was get a little bit of pig fat on the blade. That was it. I was very pleased with the results of those tests. So they tested all my work at once.
I go for it.
Okay, so the shirt I'm wearing today is one that was given to me by a customer who is a soldier in the global war on terror, who works out of Africa. So he sent me this shirt, and I appreciate it.
That's pretty awesome.
And speaking of t-shirts, I now have t-shirts available. Here's a picture. If you're interested, contact information is on my blog, helmforge.com. My cameraman, Toby Nieto, Stonehaven Knife Works, also has t-shirts available with artwork by the same awesome artist, Matt Dick, mattdickstudios.com.
Yep.
Check out his information to find out how to buy a t-shirt from him.
I am also the face on James's shirts.
Very true. Because he did this back in 2011. And it gave me that t-shirt idea way back then. I'm glad to finally be able to execute it. So, t-shirts available. Thank you so much to my customer that gave me this one. And peace out. You're kind of turning.
No, I'm still on you.
Oh, well, it looks like a shoot on here. All right.
You're in the frame. You're just over here. You don't have to be center frame. I got you.
I have to be the center of attention. Yeah. See, we burned up a whole hour.